Hello, my name is Sofia Rahman. I'm a legal fellow at the ACLU of Michigan, and today I just want to talk about two bills that the ACLU of Michigan is really focused on in the upcoming year that are focused on protecting the privacy and constitutional rights of Michigan citizens as law enforcement gain access to ever increasingly more advanced technology. The first bill that I want to discuss deals with license plate readers. License plate readers are cameras that are installed on utility poles or under bridges or on patrol cars, and essentially they take photos of every license plate that passes them. And so potentially they could be taking photos of thousands of cars a minute. The photo is then converted into a text that a device can read. It can read the license plate number, and it scans the license plate number against a series of databases to see if there's a match. It can be a criminal database, a database for outstanding warrants, several different databases. And when a match occurs, the officer is notified immediately and of the vehicle's location, current location, as well as whatever the criminal association is to the vehicle. The problem is that these license plate readers are not just collecting the license plate numbers, they are storing the photographs and all the information available in the photographs, as well as stamping the photographs with a GPS location, time, and date. And then these are being stored, sometimes indefinitely. This technology has the potential to turn into a tool for mass location tracking and indiscriminate location tracking of innocent people whose information is being held in a database for no apparent law enforcement purpose. We're very concerned about it, particularly because this technology is often obtained through grants that aren't necessarily public, and so local communities don't realize that it's already being deployed in their neighborhoods. We have provided recommendations to the Michigan legislature, and those recommendations are reflected in a bill that has been proposed by Representative Sam Singh. We strongly support the bill. The bill seeks to regulate license plate readers and provide standards for their use and highly curtail their use. And we believe that's a better situation than the one now, in which there are no standards, and we don't expect the federal government to act on this anytime soon, and we don't want to wait to protect the privacy rights of people in Michigan. So our recommendations to the Michigan legislature were that any bill has to prohibit storage of data where there is no match to any sort of criminal association. That would be information of innocent people, and that can't be retained. There should be limits on how long the information is kept, and that's the most important part of this. It shouldn't be kept for months or years. It should be kept for, at most, days or weeks. And people should be able to find out if their license plate is in the database. The bill should cover private companies to make sure that they're not using it in ways that are inappropriate, and law enforcement should be transparent about how they're using it and who they are sharing it with. And again, the purpose has to be, the use of the readers has to be only for law enforcement purposes and nothing more. So the bill by Representative Sam Singh reflects a lot of our recommendations. It says that law enforcement agencies can't use license plate readers unless they already, the local communities already have put in place regulations for their use, so they just can't be unregulated. And they have to make sure that their databases are current, so that we're not stopping people for outdated information that never should have been there in the first place. There are training requirements, there are access restrictions. The readers can only be used to detect cars that have been stolen or where the occupants might be endangered or on a missing persons list or on a wanted list. and it would allow for surveillance where there's an ongoing specific criminal investigation, among other things. Under the bill, if there's a match between the license plate and the database, that would be considered reasonable suspicion for an officer to stop a vehicle just long enough to determine whether or not that information is true. And that information must be purged from the records no later than 48 hours after the shift in which it was obtained. The bill also suggests that the Attorney General should conduct audits to make sure that local law enforcement are complying with the requirements under the bill. Right now, the bill isn't moving because this issue is still gaining attention in Lansing. Legislators are slowly becoming aware of it, so we don't expect it to see it on a state level in the very near future, but we anticipate that it's going to come before another committee hearing, and again, we're going to make sure that the bill retains Fourth Amendment protections. We encourage people to contact their representatives to support the bill and express any concerns they might have, or certain protections that they want to see. We also encourage people to go to their city council meetings and find out whether or not automatic license plate readers are being used in their town, whether it's been approved for law enforcement, and if it hasn't, whether to put in place procedures so that the public can be part of the process in deciding when and if that happens. So that's the first bill. The second bill has to deal with domestic drones.
Say the name of the first bill.
Oh, I'm sorry. The first bill, I believe, is House Bill 4981, and it's been introduced by Representative Sam Singh, who's a Democrat from East Lansing. And the second bill that I'm going to talk about is a bill that's been introduced by Representative Tom McMillan, who is a Republican from Rochester Hills. And it's two bills, House Bill 4455 and House Bill 4456. So these bills deal with domestic drones, which are unmanned aerial vehicles that carry cameras, and they're operated remotely by a person. And they're used both by the government and the private sector. The FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, currently has very little regulation over domestic drones, but Congress did last year pass a bill requiring that all domestic drones be integrated into federal airspace by 2015. So this is about to become a very big issue, and we're trying to get ahead of it by making sure that Michigan is especially protective of its citizens' privacy rights, no matter what the federal standards might be. Obviously our concerns about the use of domestic drones now is that there is no federal law requiring warrants or any sort of standard. So because there are no rules, there's easily misuse. And additionally, the use of domestic drones is invasive enough, but it's especially so when it's outfitted with additional technology like facial recognition software, night vision, and see-through imaging, all those kinds of things. In addition, this technology is being used in conjunction with other technology like the license plate readers, like cell phone tracking, which creates a state in which the public is constantly under surveillance, and that's troubling, especially as this technology becomes less costly and easier to purchase and more ubiquitous, therefore. And while we're currently talking about it in the form of surveillance, it's inevitable that eventually down the road law enforcement is going to seek to use this for broader purposes, including intervention on the ground, and that's troubling because they could use it, as has been done in the past with technology, to dispel protesters or follow certain people who are politically active. It could be used to deploy weapons, all kinds of things that would be clearly unconstitutional, but that seem to be the trend when we allow an exception for law enforcement. And we're also worried because the use of domestic drones is part of a larger trend we're seeing in removing discretion from officers and putting it into, inanimate objects that aren't able to feel or see context and human interaction and understand, that maybe the situation wasn't as I first perceived. And that's troubling because the Constitution also requires that. We have a lot of standards based on perception and reasonableness that aren't taken into account with the use of drones. And it's particularly disturbing because this technology tends to be used disproportionately in communities of color. So we have expressed to the Michigan legislature 4 of our largest concerns and issues that we think are really important. The first being that any legislation has to prohibit the government from the ability to engage in mass surveillance, mass indiscriminate surveillance, which means that information can only be collected for evidentiary purposes where there's a specific criminal investigation or an emergency. And they can't be used over private property outside of the Fourth Amendment's requirements for a search warrant based on probable cause, just as would be required any time the government seeks to enter private property, whether it be your home or your business. Our second emphasis is that there absolutely should be no weapons outfitted to domestic drones, be it lethal or non-lethal, and that's pretty self-evident. Why? The third thing we emphasized was that information that is collected for one purpose, exigency purposes, search and rescue, firefighting, hostage situation, can't then be used for general law enforcement purposes. It was collected under one standard, and there are reasons why it was allowed to be collected under that standard that would not permit the collection of that information to be used for law enforcement. And it's very important that those rules be adhered to because they're mandated by our Constitution. And the fourth thing is that we believe strongly that, especially in the context of surveillance, oversight has to include communities, not just stay within the ambit of law enforcement. It's very important for local city councils and communities to set the rules and standards for the use of domestic drones in their own neighborhoods. We believe that current privacy laws aren't strong enough to ensure that new technology will automatically align itself with the Constitution. So we support the 2 bills that are being introduced by Representative McMillan. We are really glad to see that as the bill stands right now, it includes many of our recommendations. And some of those include that the use of domestic drones has to comply with all FAA requirements. They can only be used where a local council has already approved them and put them under regulation. No weapons. That would be considered a violation under this bill. There are strict limits on who the information can be disclosed to. Data that is collected beyond the scope of a target, the target of the warrant, would have to be deleted within 24 hours. And again, there would be a Fourth Amendment requirement of a search warrant with probable cause for the use of a drone over private property. There would also be an exception under certain, an allowance for delays under certain emergency exceptions. And there's also a reporting requirement on the use and frequency and when and why people who are not the target of a warrant are sort of being encapsulated into the surveillance footage. Right now, this bill also hasn't moved, but Representative McMillan is putting together a working group to sort of flesh it out and move it forward. This is great because it means it's going forward, but it also means that there are likely to be compromises, as all legislation requires, and we at the ACLU are definitely going to be pushing for what the Fourth Amendment requires. We also are working with the Michigan State Police, who have applied to the FAA for approval for the use of drones. They have drafted some guidelines that are based on our guidelines, and they've reached out to us for review and input, and so we're happy to be guiding that process. In terms of what citizens can do, we strongly encourage people to contact their representatives and emphasize what they find to be troubling, what they like about the bill to make sure that it doesn't get compromised out of the bill, and just their general support so that legislators know how important this is to the public, and how much the public appreciates that we're putting privacy first in Michigan. And again, to contact your local, city council and law enforcement to see if this technology is already being used, or how the public can ensure that it has to go through them first. So those are the two bills that we're looking at right now. As I said, the ACLU of Michigan has decided to make this an important focus for the upcoming year, so we anticipate looking a lot more closely at these issues and new uses of technology around the state, and we'll be keeping everyone updated as we take action on that. Thank you so much for listening, and please contact us if you have any questions, tips, and any other concerns you might have about the use of technology in your neighborhood.
Thank you, Sophia, very much. Now, how do they get in touch with you?
So you can go to our website, which is www.aclumich.org, and our website, lists all of our privacy and technology work. It also lists our staff members, the person that you think would be sort of most, the best person to contact for your issue. And my information, my email address is SRAHM as in Mary, AN as in Nancy, at ACLUMich.org, and you're free to contact me if you have any questions or want to voice your concerns to us as well. And we'd be happy to hear from you.
Thank you for your time.